Some people don't compete with you openly. They don't challenge you directly. Instead, they play games. Quiet psychological games designed to pull you down, confuse you, and slowly chip away at your confidence. Not because you did something wrong, but because your growth, your confidence, your peace reminds them of everything they feel they lack. Inferiority is a powerful emotion, and when someone feels small around you, they rarely admit it. They manipulate, they distort, they create subtle psychological traps. Tonight, we're exposing 8 mind games people play when they secretly feel inferior to you. Once you recognize these patterns, their power disappears and your control begins. Welcome to Obsidian Mind. The first mind game is small, constant criticism, disguised as honesty. It rarely shows up as direct insults. There are no obvious attacks, no aggressive confrontations. Instead, it appears as tiny remarks that seem harmless on the surface. You could have done that better. Are you sure that's the best choice? I mean, it's okay, I guess. Individually, these comments might sound normal. In fact, if you heard them once or twice, you might even assume the person is just being honest or offering feedback. But the real damage comes from repetition. Over time, those small comments start stacking up in your mind. They plant quiet seeds of doubt. And doubt is powerful because it slowly reshapes how you see yourself. You begin to question your instincts. You begin to second-guess your decisions. You begin to feel less certain about things you were once confident about. This is exactly how the mind game works. When someone secretly feels inferior to you, your progress becomes uncomfortable for them to watch. Your growth reminds them of the gap between where you are and where they feel stuck. Instead of improving themselves to close that gap, some people try to shrink your perceived value. If they can make you doubt your abilities, then psychologically, the distance between you and them feels smaller. In other words, they don't need to rise higher if they can convince you to step lower. This pattern often shows up in everyday situations, especially in workplaces or social circles, where people naturally compare themselves to each other. Imagine this. You've been working hard for months. Late nights, extra effort. You push yourself, and eventually, the results start to show. Maybe your boss praises your performance. Maybe you earn recognition in front of your team. For a moment, you feel proud of what you've built. Then someone nearby responds with something like, "Yeah, but let's see if you can keep it up." At first, it sounds like a harmless comment, but something about it feels slightly off. It takes the moment of achievement and quietly shifts the focus toward doubt. Suddenly, instead of enjoying your progress, you are thinking about whether you can prove yourself again. That's not encouragement. That's controlled discouragement. It's designed to keep you slightly uncertain, slightly defensive, always feeling like you still have something to prove. And the psychology behind it is simple. Confident people are difficult to compete with. They make decisions faster. They take opportunities without hesitation. They move forward without constantly looking for approval. But a person filled with self-doubt becomes easier to influence. They hesitate more. They question themselves more. They hold back more. So when someone repeatedly delivers subtle criticism, disguised as honesty, the goal is rarely improvement. The goal is to quietly weaken your confidence until you no longer stand as tall as you once did. The second mind game is the backhanded compliment. At first, it sounds like praise. In fact, If someone overheard the conversation, they might even assume the person is being supportive. But something about it feels slightly off. You're actually smarter than I expected. Wow, you clean up pretty well. You're doing really good for someone your age. On the surface, these statements sound positive. They contain words that normally signal approval. But hidden inside them is a quiet message of low expectations. The compliment isn't pure. It carries a subtle reminder that the person never believed in your abilities to begin with. And that's exactly what makes this tactic so effective. Psychologically, it allows someone to do two things at the same time. First, they acknowledge your progress. They recognize that you've done something impressive or noticeable. Ignoring it completely would make them look bitter or jealous. But second, they attach a quiet limitation to that praise. A small implication that says, "I didn't expect much from you anyway." This protects their ego because if they openly admitted that you are competent, intelligent, or capable, they would have to confront something uncomfortable. They would have to admit that you might actually be ahead of them. And for someone struggling with feelings of inferiority, that realization can be deeply threatening. So instead of giving genuine praise, they reshape it into something safer for their self-image. The compliment becomes a way to soften your achievement. It becomes praise with a built-in ceiling. But the real genius of this mind game appears when you react to it. If you question the comment or show discomfort, they can immediately step back and say something like, "Relax, I was complimenting you." And now the situation flips. Suddenly, you appear overly sensitive. They appear friendly and supportive, and the subtle insult disappears behind the shield of good intentions. This is what makes the backhanded compliment such a perfect psychological trap. It allows someone to lower your perceived value while still maintaining the appearance of kindness. But once you recognize the pattern, the illusion fades. Because genuine respect never needs to hide an insult inside a compliment. The third mind game is downplaying your achievements. Have you ever shared good news with someone, only to feel the excitement drain out of the room almost instantly? You finally say something like, "I got promoted. You're proud. You worked hard." Maybe it took months or even years of effort to get there. And the response you receive is calm, casual, almost dismissive. "Oh yeah, promotions happen all the time." Or maybe you reach a personal goal you've been chasing for a long time. Something that required discipline, focus, and consistency. You share the moment, and someone shrugs and says, "Anyone could do that if they tried." In that moment, the energy changes. Your accomplishment suddenly feels smaller than it did just seconds ago. This is what psychologists sometimes call achievement dilution. It's the subtle act of shrinking someone's success so it doesn't appear impressive anymore. And it's one of the clearest signs of hidden insecurity. When people feel secure in themselves, they don't struggle to celebrate the progress of others. In fact, confident individuals often enjoy seeing people around them succeed. It doesn't threaten them because their sense of self isn't built on constant comparison. But when someone feels inferior, your progress becomes uncomfortable to witness. Your success quietly highlights something they would rather ignore: the gap between where you are and where they feel they should be. That realization creates psychological pressure. And instead of confronting that pressure by improving themselves, some people take an easier route. They rewrite the story. Your success becomes luck. Your discipline becomes coincidence. Your achievement becomes not that big of a deal. It's a subtle shift in narrative, designed to protect their self-image. Because if your accomplishment is truly impressive, then they have to admit something difficult. They have to admit that you did something they haven't done. So the mind looks for a way to reduce the impact. If they can convince themselves, and sometimes even you, that your achievement isn't special, then the comparison stops feeling so painful. But the truth remains unchanged. Your effort was real. Your progress was earned, and someone minimizing it says far more about their internal struggle than it does about your success. Because people who are confident in their own path don't feel the need to shrink someone else's victory. The fourth mind game is the silent competition. Some people turn everyday conversations into subtle contests. But the strange part is, they never announce it. There are no open challenges, no direct rivalries. Everything happens quietly beneath the surface. You mention that you've been going to the gym more consistently. Suddenly, they start talking about their workouts, how long they train, how intense their routine is, how disciplined they've been lately. You bring up a book you recently finished reading. They immediately mention that they've been reading several books a month. You talk about a milestone at work, maybe landing a new opportunity, or finishing an important project, and almost instantly, they respond with something about a similar achievement they've had. Individually, these moments seem harmless. After all, conversations often involve sharing experiences. But when it happens repeatedly, a pattern begins to appear. Every time you share progress, they respond with something that places them slightly ahead. It's subtle, but constant. And the psychological goal behind it is simple. They are trying to regain a sense of superiority. When someone secretly feels inferior to you, your growth activates comparison in their mind. Your progress becomes a reference point they can't ignore, and comparison creates pressure. It forces them to evaluate where they stand in relation to you. For someone who feels secure, this comparison might simply be motivating. It can inspire improvement or curiosity. But for someone who feels threatened, it creates discomfort. So they try to restore balance in the quickest way possible, not through real growth, but through conversation. They start trying to outdo you in subtle ways. They redirect the focus back to themselves. They mention experiences, achievements, or habits that position them slightly higher in the invisible hierarchy of the conversation. And often, they may not even realize they're doing it consciously. The behavior is driven by an internal need to feel equal or superior again. Because if every conversation ends with you appearing more accomplished, more disciplined, or more successful, their sense of identity begins to feel unstable. So the mind looks for small opportunities to tip the scale. But this silent competition reveals something important. Your growth has become their measuring stick, and people rarely measure themselves against someone they truly believe they are above. The fifth mind game is passive-aggressive behavior. Direct confrontation requires confidence. It requires someone to openly express what they feel, even if it's uncomfortable. But people who secretly feel inferior often avoid that kind of honesty. Instead of saying what's bothering them, they communicate through subtle hostility. Passive aggression. It shows up in small ways that are easy to deny, but hard to ignore. Sarcasm, cold responses, a sudden change in tone. For example, You ask a simple question during a conversation, maybe something completely normal, and the response you get is something like, "Oh wow, you don't know that." The words are short, but the message underneath is clear. It's not really about answering your question. It's about making you feel slightly smaller for asking it. Other times, the behavior becomes even more subtle. Someone who used to be friendly suddenly becomes distant. Their responses get shorter. Their body language closes off. Eye contact disappears. Conversations feel tense for reasons you can't quite explain. You can sense that something is wrong. So eventually, you ask the obvious question, "Did I do something?" And the answer comes quickly, "Nothing." That single word shuts down the conversation, while leaving the tension exactly where it was. This is the nature of passive aggression. It allows someone to release their frustration without openly admitting what they feel. They can express irritation, resentment, or jealousy in small indirect ways, while still maintaining plausible deniability. If you call them out, they can simply say, "You're overthinking it." Psychologically, it's a form of emotional smoke. You can feel it in the atmosphere. You know something is burning underneath the surface. But the person creating it refuses to acknowledge the fire, and the reason behind it is simple. Admitting insecurity requires vulnerability. It means facing uncomfortable emotions, like jealousy, resentment, or self-doubt. For someone who already feels inferior, that level of honesty can feel threatening. Manipulation feels safer than vulnerability. So instead of speaking openly, they let their frustration leak out through passive, indirect behavior. The sixth mind game is spreading quiet doubt about you. This is one of the darker and more calculated forms of psychological manipulation. Instead of confronting you directly, the person works behind the scenes, shaping how others perceive you. There are no obvious accusations, no dramatic conflicts, just small, carefully placed comments. "I mean, he's good, but sometimes he exaggerates. She's talented, but I've heard she's difficult to work with." At first glance, these statements don't sound aggressive. In fact, they almost sound fair, balanced, as if the person is simply offering an honest observation. That's exactly why this tactic is so effective. The comments are designed to sound reasonable, rather than hostile. They carry just enough uncertainty to make people pause and reconsider their opinion of you. Over time, those small doubts start to grow. Someone hears the comment and begins to look at you slightly differently. The next time you speak confidently, they might wonder if you're exaggerating. The next time you assert an idea, they might question whether you're difficult to work with. And slowly, the perception around you begins to shift. Not because of anything you did, but because someone quietly planted a seed of doubt. This is reputation manipulation. It's psychological sabotage, carried out in subtle ways that are hard to trace back to a single moment. No one can point to a clear attack, yet the atmosphere around your name begins to change. Why would someone do this? Because when a person feels overshadowed by you, your presence can make them feel smaller. Your competence, confidence, or recognition may highlight their own insecurities. If they cannot rise to your level through effort or growth, they may try to pull your reputation down instead. Lowering how others see you restores balance in their mind. If people doubt you, admire you less, or question your credibility, then the gap between you and them suddenly feels smaller. It's not competition through achievement. It's competition through quiet erosion of your image. The seventh mind game is trying to control your confidence. Confidence can be unsettling for insecure people. Not arrogance, not ego, but the quiet kind of confidence that comes from knowing who you are and trusting your own judgment. That calm, grounded self-belief changes the dynamics in any room. It affects how you speak, how you make decisions, and how others respond to you. And for someone who already feels inferior, that kind of presence can feel threatening. So instead of improving their own confidence, they start trying to test yours. They challenge your opinions. They question your decisions. They second-guess your plans. But the key detail is this: they are not doing it out of genuine curiosity. Healthy discussion looks different. In a healthy conversation, people ask questions to understand your thinking. They add ideas. They offer constructive feedback. But in this situation, the pattern is different. The goal isn't understanding. The goal is disruption. They want to see if they can shake your certainty. Because if your confidence starts to crack, even slightly, it makes them feel less inferior by comparison. Imagine a simple scenario. You're in a meeting or a conversation with friends, and you share an idea. You explain it clearly and confidently. Instead of asking questions or exploring the idea further, someone immediately responds with a blunt statement. That won't work. No explanation, no reasoning, no attempt to offer a better alternative. Just a quick dismissal that shuts the idea down. The intention isn't to improve the idea. The intention is to challenge your confidence. It's a subtle power move designed to create hesitation. If you start defending yourself, over-explaining your thoughts, or doubting your own perspective, the psychological balance shifts. Suddenly, they feel more in control of the conversation. The deeper reason this happens is simple. Confidence changes social hierarchies. When someone carries themselves with certainty and calm self-belief, people naturally listen to them more. Their ideas carry weight. Their presence commands attention. For someone struggling with insecurity, that shift can feel uncomfortable. It threatens the position they believe they should hold. So instead of adjusting to the new dynamic, they try to push back against it. They challenge, question, and dismiss in subtle ways, hoping to pull your confidence down to a level where they feel safer again. But true confidence isn't easily controlled. It remains steady even when someone tries to shake it. The eighth mind game is the disappearing support. And in many ways, it's the most revealing of them all. Some people seem incredibly supportive when your life is difficult, when you're struggling, uncertain, or going through setbacks. They're always there. They listen to your problems. They offer advice. They empathize with what you're going through. In those moments, they appear caring and understanding. It feels like they genuinely want to see you get through the hard times. But something strange begins to happen when your situation changes. When things start improving, their energy begins to shift. You begin to notice it slowly. They respond to your messages less often. Their enthusiasm fades. They stop asking about your progress. The conversations that once felt supportive now feel distant and short. Nothing dramatic happens. They don't openly criticize you. They don't attack your success. They simply begin to disappear. This pattern is often called conditional support. It means someone is comfortable supporting you only when your situation keeps the psychological balance in their favor. When you're struggling, they feel safe around you. Your challenges place you on equal ground with them, or sometimes even below them. In those moments, offering support, makes them feel helpful, generous, even slightly superior. But when you start succeeding, that balance changes. Your growth begins to highlight a gap between where you are and where they feel they are. And for someone already dealing with feelings of inferiority, that gap becomes uncomfortable to face. Watching your progress forces them to confront something they would rather avoid: their own stagnation, their own lack of movement, their own unrealized potential. That kind of self-reflection can be painful. It requires honesty and effort to grow. So instead of facing that discomfort, some people choose distance. They pull back emotionally. They engage less. They slowly remove themselves from your journey. Not because you did something wrong, but because staying close to your progress reminds them of what they haven't done. And for them, stepping away feels easier than confronting the truth your growth quietly reveals. The truth is, your growth will always reveal people's hidden emotions. Confidence attracts respect, but it also exposes insecurity. Some people will celebrate your rise, others will quietly resent it. The difference between the two tells you everything you need to know about who belongs in your life. So pay attention to behavior, not words, not promises, not appearances. Behavior always reveals the truth beneath the mask. And once you understand these mind games, you stop being manipulated by them. You observe them. You detach from them. And most importantly, you rise above them. Because the strongest mind in the room is the one that refuses to play the game. Welcome to Obsidian Mind.